Hello, I'm Pastor Don. Welcome to Outback Adventures. Today I'd like to take you on a long journey with me up into the central north of Western Australia, and we're going to visit a number of Aboriginal communities in this area. And so we'll start off at Newman. Newman is a mining town, iron ore mining town in the north of the west. And there they've got this big iron ore kangaroo, you could say. But let's head on the road out to Jigalong. It's another 165 kilometres from Newman, heading out to the edge of the Gibson Desert and the Little Sandy Desert. Doesn't always look beautiful and green like this, but after good rains, it's beautiful how the country looks. Look at the spinifex there. It really is something to see. Well, we've made many visits to Jigalong, and Jigalong, we have some good church meetings there with the people. They love to come and hear about Jesus and hear the messages from the Bible. There's Steve Peets leading some singing on one occasion. Pastor Lamani is living in Jigalong at this time with his wife and family, and he's a good musician, and they're leading out for the worship service. Often the children will sing, and they love to come out and be involved in the action songs and sing on the microphone. There we have fellowship lunch sometimes, and you notice this dog there. He's hoping he'll get some fellowship lunch as well. But Pastor Lamani has been trying to reach some of the people that don't regularly come to church, and so he's been having closing Sabbath on the basketball court, and also then having games with the children. And they really love these activities, and I think it's a very good way of connecting with the people. The Western Australian Conference has an agreement with Morribee Mission in Papua New Guinea. And so some Papua New Guinea pastors and lay folk came to visit there at Jigalong. And so Pastor Jeffrey Pomalu and Brother John there are visiting with Baker Lane. He's showing them some of his boomerangs and shields and so on that he has made. While the Papua New Guinea people were there, they were able to meet some of the Kunawaragi folk who had come down for a funeral at Jigalong. And so Joan Wilberforce and some of her families are there. Well, the Papua New Guinea folk, they sang to the people. Pastor Jeffrey preached a very good message to the people. The people came and listened. And I think Pastor Jeffrey was a little bit surprised about our Sabbath activity, because instead of church that day, we had a double funeral instead. And there's Pastor Jeffrey Pomalu standing between the two graves where we buried folk that day. But it was good to have them there and to have a part in the services that day. Well, at Jigalong, I guess, is famous because of the rabbit-proof fence ladies. And here on the right is old Molly. She has since finished, passed away. But we met her daughter, Doris Pilkington. And Doris is the one who wrote the story of her mother, the rabbit-proof fence, and it was on that the movie was built. Tells the story of this lady and her sister, a couple of her sisters, who were taken away because they were pale of colour. They had white father. And they were taken down to the Moore River settlement, taken away by force from their parents. And the story is told of how Molly and Daisy and Gracie, they escaped, and they followed the rabbit-proof fence. That's the fence that's there in Western Australia to block off the rabbits. And they knew that this fence would lead them back home to Jigalong, and they followed all the way. A tremendous distance, couple of thousand kilometres, well, probably 1,500 kilometres back home. And so it's an amazing story to think. And by the way, Molly did it not just once, but a couple of times, followed the fence back home. Well, there's Steve with Cedric and Sherelle and their lovely little family. It's nice to go visiting there, and On Sunday afternoon, we decided to go out bush with the folk and have a little time of relaxing out there. They lit a big fire ready to roast some food, and there's Margaret Sampson with some of the lovely children. Steve there talking with Margaret. Margaret's one of the leaders there in the community. And it's good time when you're out in the bush, just relaxed, where you can sit down and talk about many things, and people open up and they share what's on their heart, and you're able to encourage them. There's Pastor Sire sitting down with Steve talking to Baker Lane, one of the elders of Jigalong community, and this man is a Seventh-day Adventist. Well, there's some of the modern contraptions were taken out into the bush. There's Bernice Sampson having a little ride on one of these. But also it was time to go honey anting. And there's Tanya Charles digging there looking for honey ants, and the children all sitting around waiting to get them. I thought I'd help them dig. They struck a root. Really, that's not the way to dig for honey ants. You'd spoil them all by bursting them. But anyway, I was trying to break through the roots so that they could dig more gently to find them. But eventually, there they came across a little nest of ants. These ants, they bury themselves deep down in the ground, and other workers come and feed them the nectar and the honey, and there they store it in their bodies. And you don't eat the ant, you eat the honey, but it's beautiful, sweet honey. It really is lovely. And there's Tanya with a handful of these honey ants. A lot of work to get them, by the way. A lot of digging and a lot of scooping dirt out of the hole and so on. Well, there's one of the children ready to eat the honey ant. And then the children found some of these little frogs there. There was no river, but they dig down in the sand where it's moist, and there they were able to find these little frogs. Well, they took some time to read the Good News magazine while they're out there and look at the pictures, and they're just to relax. It's nice to be able to do this. Some of the beautiful little children there. There's Kennedy Finlay showing us what the people used to do when they had no bed, no mattress. They'd just pull down the branch of certain trees, and that would make a softer place to lie and to have a little rest in during the day. Well, there's Phyllis Rogers and Janelle sitting there with my wife Eileen having a bit of a chat. And on the way back home, there we spotted these bush turkeys. And they love to catch these bush turkeys. They're certainly a prize piece of food. Well, there's Brian Sampson. And on one particular visit, Brian said to me, "Pastor," he said, "you should go and meet Eileen Charles. She has an amazing story." And so we're going to take a break now, and when we come back, I'm going to tell you how this wonderful story that Eileen Charles shared with me. Welcome back to Outback Adventures. Before the break, I mentioned that Brian Sampson had said to me, you should talk to Eileen Charles. She has an interesting story to tell. And so I went to look up Eileen Charles. She said, you know, I was reading the Bible, Pastor. I was trying to understand the Bible, she said. And I think it was regarding the Sabbath issue. And she said, as I read, I just couldn't seem to understand it. And then she said, I heard this hawk bird squawk above me and flutter his wings. And I thought, that's interesting. And then she continued to try to read the Bible, and she looked down the street, and there she looked toward one of our Adventist church members' houses, Jesse Colley's house. And there, she said, there was that hawk bird fluttering over the top of Jesse's house and squawking. She thought, maybe God telling me I should go down there to Jesse's house. And so she went down to Jesse's house. No one was home when she got there. The door was open. She walked in, and there on the table was the Bible. And so she sat down and she opened up the Bible and she began to read. And Eileen said this is what she read. She turned there to Luke chapter 23, that's where the Bible opened, and it said, that day was the preparation. That is, the day Jesus died, and the Sabbath drew near. And the women who had come with him from Galilee followed after, and they observed the tomb and how his body was laid. Then they returned and prepared spices and fragrant oils, and they rested on the Sabbath according to the commandment. And then she read the next verse, which says, now on the first day of the week, very early in the morning, they and certain other women with them came to the tomb, bringing the spices which they had prepared. And Eileen said, thank you, Lord. That's answered my confusion. I can see the day Jesus died, the day we call Good Friday, that's the day in the Bible they call the preparation day. And then Jesus rose on Easter Sunday, the resurrection day, and the day in between is the Sabbath, which we have called Saturday. She said, thank you, Lord, you've answered my confusion. And so the next Sabbath she was standing out the front of her house, and from the front of her house you look over towards the Adventist church. It's not very far away. And as she was standing there looking, guess what happened? There was that hawk bird up above the church, squawking and fluttering. And Eileen said, I think that hawk bird, he led me to the true church. And so it was a very wonderful experience. And God leads many of these people through means that they can understand. Well, let's take a journey now further out into the desert. We're going to visit 3 communities, Cotton Creek, Punmu and Coonawarrigi, and they are hundreds of kilometres further out into the desert of central north of Western Australia. This was the team that came with us there on the journey, my wife there and Diane Brand, Matthew Long and Pastor Sire and Pastor Lamani. And so we headed along the Billanuka track, I should say, and there we came across these sandy tracks, the camel along the side of the road, wild camels these are, and then we continued along our journey, and finally we came to the sign which has Cotton Creek written in language, and I won't try to say that one because I always get it wrong. But anyway, there's that little community of Cotton Creek. You can just see it there under the hills on the horizon. When we got there, Jimmy Williams was there, one of the elders of the community, and he was so happy that we had come to run some meetings to share the story of Jesus. And so there we met with some of his family, Lizzie Caterbill and Norina and Carol Williams and dear old Mabel down the front. Mabel would rouse on me, you know, if I didn't come and pick her up for church when she was living down in Jigalong. But anyway, it was lovely to catch up with them. Sharon Melina there, one of our church members, a lovely lady. And there I caught up with dear old Daisy. Daisy is the other rabbit-proof fence lady I was mentioning about before. Daisy can't walk too much these days. Her eyes are not so good, but there she is. And it was lovely to be able to spend a little time with her. Well, when evening came, word went around the community that we were there, and folk came for a meeting. And I think a good proportion of the community were there that night. And the kids sang and the people sang, and there we preached the story of Jesus. My wife was able to help some of the folk get some Bible story books and DVDs and that sort of thing. And they took us out to show us a very important sight. This is a rock hole. And there you can see the water down there. This is a permanent water hole. And you know, when you look at this, these places are so significant to the people, and it's so important that they know where to find them. Their survival depended upon it. Well, there we are, all lined up with our four-wheel drives, ready to head further out west. Out east, I should say, and when we come back from the break, that's where we're going. Welcome back to Outback Adventures. We're going to head now out into the desert of Western Australia, out into communities like Punmu and Coonawarrigi. It's a long drive, so I hope you can stay with us. There you see the sign that points to the Riddell River. This was a track that we took to take us from Cotton Creek up to Punmu. A long way though before we would get to this beautiful river. There we went along these little sandy tracks, some very picturesque countryside there. There'd been some rain, and so there were puddles of water to negotiate, and some of them were so bad that you couldn't go through them, and so they've made detours, and so you take to the bush and you just go around and come back on the road when you've gone past the boggy and wet spot. Others, we decided we'd go straight through them and hope for the best. But you know, it is beautiful out there in the desert. Look at the colour there of this mud flat salt lake, and there the hills in the distance, covered with spinifex. It's really something. Other places, we went through the road there where it had been dug down and the sandbanks there beside us. Other places on the road are quite rugged. It was quite a journey up through this track, but finally we came to the Riddell River, and there it's a picture of beauty, and you see the reflection of the red hills there in the water. And so we had our lunch there. There's Pastor Lamani holding little Ezekiel, and Pastor Sire, I should say, holding little Ezekiel with Pastor Lamani looking on. And even that, you know, it's beautiful, isn't it? The desert, you know, it's different from green, grassy areas, but it has a beauty all of its own. And so we continued on. We were heading for Punmu. There you see the spinifex and the hills, and it really is something lovely. Oh, we pass old Mr. Camel along the way, and there see some more beautiful scenery. Where there's been rain, you get some green grass, and so it's quite nice. And eventually we came to the Telfer mine, a very remote mine. They fly people into these mines to work, and then they work for a number of days, and then they fly them back out again, but very remote areas. And so from Telfer Mine, it was still 144 kilometres through to Punmu, and another 326 through to Kunawarrigi. And as you go along the road there, you see the sand hills. Here they're covered with vegetation, but you can pick out the sand hills, and often you drive down between the sand hills. And it's, again, a picture of beauty to see the red-coloured sand out in this part of the country. Well, we came to Punmu, and we just stayed the night, and then we headed straight on to Kunawarrigi, another 178 kilometres. The road became more of a track out there. We went past Lake Ald, which is 52,000 hectares, great salt lake. Only after good rains does it have water in it. And sometimes the colour of the road changed. You see the white colour there instead of the familiar red. Well, eventually we came to the Canning Stock Route. Now, the Canning Stock Route is 1,850 kilometres long. It runs from Walloona near the centre of Western Australia right up to the Kimberley, to the north there. And this is one of the longest historic stock routes in the world. It had its first lot of cattle taken down it in about 1910, and it has 52 wells that have been dug along this route so that they could bring cattle down and they could get a drink along the way and survive the experience. And so it was quite special to be able to stand there and to walk a little bit on this Canning Stock Route. Well, there you see well 33, one of these 54 wells, and that's right there near the Kunawarrigi community. And so we went to Kunawarrigi, to the Aboriginal community there, and there we held a meeting. Again, the announcement was made around the community that we were going to have a singing time and a sharing time, and so the children and the adults gathered, and there we sang the songs of Jesus, and we shared with them a message. I showed them pictures of my visit to the Holy Land, to the land of Jesus. And they love to see the places and to see that they're real places that they've read about in the Bible and that they've heard about. And there you see some of these lovely children. Well, while we were there at Kunawarrigi, we met up with Heston Newbury, who's the chairperson of another community further south. And we met some of these other people as well. There's Norman Sammy and his family from Cotton Creek. We'd missed them over at Cotton Creek, but there they were at Kunawarrigi. And it was interesting that the medical man there at the time was Jamie Armstrong, an Adventist man. And so we were able to stay with him and encourage him, and it was really good to catch up there. And so the time came for us to head back. And so we headed back along the track. There you can see the road just going miles into the distance. It seems to have no end. And as after good rains, you get quite nice countryside there with the grass and the spinifex all greening up. By the way, do you know what they are? They're camel footprints. And the camels there, if you look carefully, are going both ways. You can see them going that way and coming back the other way. That was just along the side of the road. Well, it's not all flat country. Some places you've got breakaways, and somehow I thought I could see the levels in there, the layers. And I think that during Noah's flood it must have laid down these sediments, layer by layer. It looks quite something. Well, there in the distance you can see some of the termites' nests. Anywhere in the north of Australia you have plenty of termites' nests. And there we came again to Lake Ald, and then we continued on, passing some of the camels along the sand ridges, and then we came back to Punmu. And there at Punmu we held a meeting. It was cold at night, it really was, but there the people came and we sang and preached. And the next morning, Sabbath morning, we had a service there on someone's veranda. Pastor Lamani preached, and there we saw Rachel Simpson with her artwork. And Sabbath afternoon, they took us down to Lake Dora, which is a big salt lake, 20,000 hectares of salt. But there, would you believe it, there in this salt lake, there was a freshwater spring. And it's always there, fresh water. And it's quite picturesque to wander around. Some of these were salty springs, others, as I said, were fresh water there. And so there's another freshwater spot. And so all these things have helped the folks survive. We went back and had another meeting at night. Well, this time we had a big fire going to keep us warm. And there we preached and told the stories of Jesus. And so we're going to head back now towards home. You see some of the big termites' nests. That's a big one, isn't it? And there the camels and the road back. It gets better as you get closer to the more built-up areas. And now we're heading to Nullagine, and we had our final meeting on this trip at Nullagine. We have many friends there at Nullagine, and that particular night I preached, and there were a number of drunks in the audience. And at the end of my meeting, I made a special appeal for those that were struggling with big problems to come forward, and I would pray for them that Jesus would help them. And you know what happened? Every drunk that was in the audience that night came forward. They staggered a little bit, but they came forward to ask for Jesus to help them. And dear friend, no matter what you are struggling with, you can come to Jesus and He will help you.